From unsolved mysteries to unexplained phenomena, from comedy gold to relationship fails, Amazon Music's got the most ad-free top podcasts, included with Prime. Because the only thing that should interrupt your listening is, well, nothing. Download the Amazon Music app today.
What's the nature of your emergency?
Welcome back to the Tactical Living Podcast. I'm your host, Ashley Walton, joined by Sergeant Walton. Good, how are you?
I'm really good.
My friend Scott Medlin reached out to me. He's from the Code 10 Mindset. I'll go ahead and I'll link all of his stuff down below, which I highly encourage that you go check out because he's incredible. He also does a lot of guest speaking. And he was talking to me about the episode that we recorded back on August 20th, show 997, where we discussed how the job can become your religion, especially when you are a police officer. And he asked me if we've ever talked about how a lot of police officers and, actually a lot of people in general can be in this situation where they're almost held hostage to their retirement. And I thought that was such a great way of framing it because it's one of those things that a lot of us don't point out when we see it happen. And he did. And what he said is, when we talk to police officers, I'll have one-on-ones with them. And a lot of the times, the thing that they share with me is that they have X amount of years left, right? They don't talk about how great their service has been. And yeah, I've been so proud to do this for the last 10 years. They always go straight to the end. And as we're having our conversation, I told him that another thing too that I hear is a lot of police officers who are held hostage to that retirement because of things like divorces that make it to where they're going to have a very difficult time financially. Until they retire, that's really the only thing that they can think about. And I think it's a concept that we should shed more light on.
Yeah, I think, and as he spoke on this, I was really thinking about some of my partners and some of the people throughout my career that I've really, spoken with and been mentored by. And we having that mindset of, and I'm absolutely guilty of it. Like when people ask, "Oh, how long you been a cop?" And I tell them, and then I'll go, "Oh yeah, I only got 10 years left, or I got 9 years left." However, whatever this situation is, and we're always looking for that end goal. And instead of just talking about, I've been, truly blessed to have this experience and everything. And over time, I've seen more and more people, like I know I can think of a handful of people right now that are literally, they're like, "Oh yeah, I can retire at any time." And then the following year, "Yeah, I can retire at any time." And you see this, they are being held hostage by that retirement. They're chasing that dollar amount. They're chasing that extra 2% raise or whatever it may be. They're always chasing something because one, they're not ready to retire, but they could retire.
One of my friends, he went through a really, really nasty divorce, and he retired from the California Highway Patrol. And because of the pension debacle, it's so sad actually. So working so hard for so long, and then you look forward to that pension, something happens, it didn't go as planned with your marriage, and then you get a divorce, and now she's getting so much of that. So he retired from CHP, and then he went on to work for the sheriff's department, which he plans on working 10 years so that he can then get in a second pension. And it's not, for his situation, it's not necessarily because he is chasing that dollar. It's because I think he'll need that financial stability. And the thing is that when a lot of people utilize their retirement as a crutch, there might be more going on there. And going back to the conversation that Scott and I were having, what we were discussing is that a lot of people will use that as an excuse to maintain their position in a job that they don't like.
Yeah, I think, you hold true and you're going to, you're not going to have that team anymore. You're not going to have that group of people that you know, like, and trust. That is your tight inner circle. But ultimately, are they your friends that you hang out with on and off duty, or is this something that you're your being is, you don't know what you're going to do after you retire. And I think that's where a lot of cops in general hold that true for themselves, is they just don't, it's the fear of the unknown.
There are some benefits to kind of have this countdown mindset. You have this clear goalpost, and it provides this sense of direction and something to work towards when you know that you get to retire in X amount of years. And it also provides that financial security. You are building this hope for stability in the future. I would implore you, if this is you, this is not a call out necessarily, but there should be more than one egg in your basket. You know, and you and I, Clint, we both work so hard. We have a rental property. We have a lot of investments that I more so than you, I'm very strategic in placing our money in certain places. And even if you don't have a partner, or let's say that you're not banking on that partner long term, like you don't want to have to rely on that being your future just in case something happens, there's a lot of other ways to build out your financial security to where you have enough cushion to give yourself options if something happens later on. One of the most tragic things that I see as a first responder is when people get into a situation in their employment, they think that they live the thin blue line, for example, they're going to retire as a first responder, and then they get medically retired, or something happens to them to where admin decided to kind of give them the middle finger, or they're going through litigations for year after year after year, which is taking any kind of financial security that they had away from them so that they can fight it. And it's very important to make sure that you do have other opportunities and ways to be able to build your wealth outside of just your job. And I don't care what the excuse is. I don't care how much or how little that you think that you have to be able to put away to be able to. A lot of people have that mindset, and yet you might ask them, like, have you ever talked to a financial advisor? Like, what is it that you've tried in order to be able to kind of build other nest eggs out? And I think that's so pivotal. And I think too that you have this sort of sense of pride in longevity. There's this badge of honor to be able to reach full retirement too, and a lot of times that can play into your ego.
Yeah, I think especially in the law enforcement realm, we focus so much on just the right now instead of preparing for the future, especially this younger generation that's coming up. Like they are not planning for their retirement whatsoever, and they have a lot longer to work than people with my time frame does have on. Like, retirement shifted. Like, when I first started, we had a 3% at 50, so where I can retire at 50. Now these guys have to work till they're 57, and they're getting a less percentage based off of that retirement. And they're just, they haven't even considered it. They're like, oh, well, I have 25, 30 years I have to work, and they haven't even considered reallocating some of their extra money into a different type of investment opportunity.
Yeah, and so many times you see officers, let's say they're midway through their career and they are just burnt out, right? This isn't what I signed up for, right? Like you hear that, and then you hear other people say, like, this is what you signed up for. When you're caught up in that loop, there are many times where you might be questioning your career. The whole George Floyd palooza was a major time in a lot of law enforcement officers' lives where they started to question their career. And some people stuck it out. Some people, things changed. Some people were supported, some weren't. But I know a lot of people who did decide to make that career change during that time. And if you're the person who's caught up in that hostage situation with your retirement, your job situation should not be the reason why you wake up every single day having to go to work, and it's the last thing that you want to do.
Yeah, I think one kind of thing to note is I know a lot of guys who, they were forced out of work early in their careers, whether they had 10 years on, 5 years on, and every single one of them, like, if I've talked to them after the fact, I don't look at them and I'm like, oh, well, they're not a cop anymore. They lost their job, whatever it is. They're going to be the next homeless guy on the street. No, they found opportunity and they worked towards it and they became successful in their new opportunity.
Yeah, and I think that's so important to point out. And For a lot of people too, I know some officers who had a paid career in law enforcement. They decided, you know what, I'm going to share one example in particular that I'm thinking of. My family doesn't think that I'm safe doing this job anymore, and it's having too much of an impact on my family. So they switched their career, and then they decided to become a reserve officer because they still have it on their heart to be able to serve in that capacity. And so that's definitely another option, because when you're in this job and you start to get caught up in the, I hate this, but I'm stuck because of my retirement situation, it builds so much resentment towards the job, towards the leadership, towards the system, eventually towards the community. And I feel like a lot of that angst can result in legal battles eventually.
And not only that, you develop a sense of complacency where you're not invested into what you're doing. So inherently, you're going to lose your officer safety. You're going to lose that kind of that drive, that desire to want to go out and actually do what your job says to do, is to protect the public, protect the Constitution. And if you don't have that drive anymore, you're putting yourself in jeopardy to where you're risking everything just because you're trying to go through the motions.
Yeah, and potentially officer safety as well. I hope you've gotten some value out of today's episode. If you have, do us a favor, drop a review, subscribe down below, and as always, know that I'm sending you a long, tight hug from my home to yours.